Yeah, I see in the Q&A, add the disk, create the empty file system on that, and mount the file system to a directory. Yep, that's pretty good. You might want to create a partition, but these days the partition might even be optional. So your answer is good. I like it. All right, so let's take a break. Let's get up and stretch. It's not obsolete on Linux. And it's a command line is provided by a program called a shell. So when you have this command line window, there's actually two things going on in here. There's two components. It looks like all one program. There's actually two components. There is the window that things are running in, and then there is the shell program running inside the window, which provides the command processing inside the command line. And so there's different shell programs inside Linux. Bash is the most common one. So Bash is called, it stands for Born Again Shell. It's kind of a joke because there was the Born Shell, which was named after a person, and then they made the new one, called it Born Again Shell, just for fun. But there are other shells that you can use. You can pick other ones that you want. A lot of times people just stick with Bash because it's easy, but you're not stuck with it if you don't want to. So you can open up a shell in the graphical environment. As you can see in the slide here, there's a terminal window shown on the right, where in here you can type in commands and do things in the command line. Some things are easier to do from the command line than from the graphical environment. Especially sophisticated searching things, I find I can do easier on the command line. In the graphical environment, I can do some basic searching very quickly, go into a search bar, type a search terms in there and find things. But if I want to be very specific about, I really only want to search in these kind of files, but not those kind of files, and I want to search by this regular expression, and I want to start doing some fancy things in there, I find it's much easier to do that from the command line than from the graphical environment. There's other reasons too to use the graphical or use the command line. So the command line, sometimes when you're managing a system remotely, you use something called secure shell to get into it. And it's typically only command line. And that's sometimes the only way you can interact with your Linux system. Sometimes too, you're working on an embedded system. You're building the device. The device may have a graphical display, but that graphical display is for the user to use. But you as the developer might need to get in there and set settings and test things and do things on it. And that graphical display is not really meant for you to use and interact with Linux underneath. It's meant to just be used as the device. And so you might need to get to the command line to do the things that you want to do as you're developing your embedded system. It's also a way to just kind of get a peek under the hood. So from the graphical display, a lot of times what's actually happening is kind of hidden from you. You click the button, it kind of sort of magically does what it's supposed to do. But if it's not working, you might not quite tell exactly why it's not working. Sometimes if you get into the command line shell and try to type commands to do it from there, you'll actually get some useful error messages and see what's going on. And so not exactly technically accurate, but it's almost kind of like, the graphical programs, the graphical display is sitting on top of the command line, and where the command line is where things are actually occurring. Again, not technically exactly accurate, but kind of close to that. So here this talks about interacting with it from the graphical desktop environment. Here we have a couple of these. We're just showing you a kind of overview. I know these are kind of hard to read. We're going to zoom in on these in the coming slides. But this kind of gives an idea on different graphical displays on Linux. A lot of times they have the same components. They just display them in different places. Sometimes there's components and features that are different and unique to one graphical display, not another. But they do overlap a lot. So you can see in here, there's like a place for settings, and then there's a place for settings here. And there's kind of your start menu where you can display applications in the list is down here for one, and happens to be in the same spot over here, but could be in a different place on others. They'll both have file managers in here where the files are displayed slightly differently. But you can get in there and do drag and drop and right-click menus and all of that on those as well. So a lot of times there are similarities between them. So if we zoom in here on the GNOME desktop, this has an application menu. I say menu in quotes here because it's not exactly a menu. You just click on that and then it shows the screen it has a grid of all the applications that you can launch. They also have a quick launch app switcher kind of thing, where if it's pinned to the quick launch bar here, it shows up as an icon in there. You can just click on it. On Linux, typically you single click for things rather than double clicking. So you single click on here, launch the program, and then once the program actually is running, then it displays a little dot showing you that it's running. If there's multiple instances of the program running, like multiple windows, you'll have a dot per instance over here. And if you launch a program using the application menu, it might not be in this bar until you actually launch it. And then it shows up in here as a running program. So it's almost kind of like the Mac OS dock bar at the bottom that they have, where it displays icons to start programs, but then also shows you your running programs where you can switch between them from the bar here. There's a file manager, like I mentioned. You can get in there, you can do searching, and your folders and files show up in there. And it works very much like other file managers do for just basic operations. It's usually pretty intuitive. Then in the GNOME desktop, they'll have a settings and indicators panel. In here, that's up in the upper right-hand corner. You can see this little power icon in here with a little arrow next to it. The whole region there is the same menu. So it's not like this has one menu and this has another and this is another. You just click anywhere in here in that upper right-hand corner and the same menu pops up. And then you can configure networks and audio. You can turn your computer off or reset and do other things in there. And then also have other indicators that might pop up in there, depending on what you have set up, where it might indicate various things on your system. Usually it's like hardware components. Like if you have a Bluetooth device, you might get a Bluetooth icon that shows up as an indicator saying you're connected to a Bluetooth device. But things like notifications that you get would be in a different area. And this is showing Manjaro. Manjaro uses the KDE, or sometimes called the Plasma desktop. It has a lot of similar components in there. They're displayed differently. There are subtle differences between them, but the basic way you interact with them can be the same between them. So it has an application menu. It has a quick launch app switcher bar. This time it's on the bottom. It has a file manager. And it has settings and indicators, which happen to be on the bottom in this case. So here we're just going to talk about how to launch programs. So this is just kind of giving an overview here when you get into it in detail coming up here. But on the GNOME desktop, you can click this thing, which I'm calling the application menu, and it looks kind of like this. And you can actually scroll through and see all the possible applications that you have in your system that have a graphical display for them, graphical windows. They don't display all the command line utilities here, just the graphical programs to keep things simple. So you can scroll through and go, oh, it's that one I want. I want to use that one. But the easiest way I find is to use the search bar at the top. So I hit this application menu here at the bottom. And then in the top in the search bar, I can type editor, for example. And it finds the gedit program, and I can push enter and launch gedit. I don't even have to get the exact name of the program correct. So if I just generally type what it is, like browser, for example, it'll show me Firefox and Google Chrome or whatever else I have installed on the system as options. So the search I find is being pretty useful. And by the way, I don't know if it's all GNOME distributions out there, but on the couple I've tried, it works where I can hit on the keyboard the Windows key, and the Windows key is as if I just clicked on this application menu and brought this up. So I usually hit Windows and then just start typing for the search and then push enter. By the way, you can do that on Windows too, which I find pretty convenient. So it's the same way of interacting regardless of the OS when you do that kind of pattern, I guess you would call it. So like I said, getting into this, you can click on it or press super or alt super. Super is like the Windows key. On Ubuntu, I can just press the Windows key without having to press alt. But on things like Fedora, I find I have to hold the alt key down for that to work that way. And then it launches programs. the program menu here, and I can pick just like we talked about earlier using the search thing in here. So like you can type spreadsheet and it'll find a spreadsheet program. In the GNOME desktop, they have a file manager. So they have on the left-hand side in there a list of different paths and directories that you can traverse to. A lot of them are in your home directory, like downloads and documents and so forth in there. So you can easily switch between them if you want. You can search and you can sort how you view items. You can view them by date and time, view them by size, or just view them by the names, and it'll sort them alphabetically. You can also use the context menu by right-clicking. You can right-click to create new directories in there and select things and find properties on different items in there. So to make a new directory from the graphical environment, you would right-click in your, wherever you're looking here, your current directory that you're viewing, right-click and click New Folder. In there, then it comes up with the box. You type in the name and then click the Create box, the green one in the little corner here, and then it makes a new directory. You can also rename things. You can go to the item, right-click on there, and then in the context menu, select Rename, and then type the new name. It usually comes up with the box where you can put the new name in there, and then you click the Rename button, or press Enter, and it renames the item, file directory, or whatever you're accessing there. If you want to edit a file, if you want to just bring up the editor as an application, you can click the application menu or hit that Windows key in the search bar, type editor, and then it'll show up. Here it has text editor as the name, but that's actually the gedit program. And then when you push enter, it comes up with gedit, and it's just a very simple editor. It's almost as simple as like Notepad, but it does have a fair number of features that make it a little bit more useful than Notepad. It's not like a full-blown IDE or anything. It's a basic editor that has some additional features in there, like line numbering. It can do word counts and other things in there too. You can also do syntax highlighting. You can install plugins to have it do all kinds of stuff in there if you wish. And then once you type in what you want, in this case, we typed in like a hello world program, and then you can go save, click the save icon, and then type the name of the program, hello.c, and save your program in there. And so we go to the directory, and there you see it. We have hello.c sitting in there as your single file in the directory. So to get help on the GNOME desktop, the easiest way I found is to just go back into that applications menu again, and then type help in the search bar, and it brings up the help application. And then you press enter, click on it, and it comes up with this, in this case, Ubuntu desktop guide. Of course, if you're running Fedora or something else with the GNOME desktop, it's not going to say Ubuntu in it. But again, it'll be like a help program that comes up and then talks about how to interact with the desktop. Okay, so there's some questions in here. So kind of going from most recent backwards, it says I use Windows via WSL. I was able to install Ubuntu and Debian distros. I noticed that all the Python and stuff in their installations in Debian could also be accessed on Ubuntu. Is that normal? I think so. The WSL is something they're still working on. So the way it works may change in the future. So things you can't currently do in there, they may change it and make it available. I think they're trying to integrate it so that the WSL, the Linux subsystem inside of Windows, seems to work seamlessly. So it's an equal way of being on your Windows computer, but it's kind of a work in progress as well. So to say if it's normal or not, I would say I think so, but I can't say for sure. And then there's a question, what is meant by embedded systems? That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. Embedded systems is where it's a device. It's not meant for general purpose computing. So it's not like your laptop, desktop types of computers. It's not your servers. It's a device but the device has a CPU in it for it to work. And so on that CPU, you might load a little operating system in there, like Linux. And in Linux in there, then you can run all the applications you want to run and make that device work the way you want it to work, as like the company creating the device. So you might put Linux on it, even though you don't expect people to interact with the Linux directly. It's what makes the device go. So for example, smart speakers would be an embedded device that typically have Linux on them. You don't interact with it. You don't even know Linux is there. It's kind of, silently running in the background and doing the stuff it's supposed to do. And then you talk to your smart speaker and it talks back to you rudely or nicely, whatever it does. And like your television sets these days have a microprocessor in them, and oftentimes they run Linux. So that's what's meant by embedded. It's actually a device not meant to be used as a normal computer, but it has computing in it. Cool. So here we're going to talk about the command line. Like I said before, the command line is an equally valid way of interacting with your Linux system. So in a typical command line, they have a couple of components in here. You might be familiar with a lot of this kind of stuff already. Some of you might have already interacted with command line on Windows with CMD or the new PowerShell that they have in there and so forth. So this might be familiar, but for some of you, this might be brand new. So I just don't want to make assumptions here. So if you're running something like Bash, which is the shell program which interprets the commands, typically, although not always, they'll have kind of these elements in your command line. It'll have a prompt. This is called the prompt. It's the whole line. And then it might include your username, so you can look very quickly and see what user you're logged in as. Then it have an @ symbol, and it has what's called the host machine name listed next. You can name your machines and give them different names, so you can look there and see really quick what machine you were on. If you're remoting into various machines, you might be secure shelled in, and you might look here real quick and go, oops, that's the wrong machine. I'm not supposed to type the command here. I'm supposed to be working on this other one. It's just a way to do a quick look and see what environment you're in. Then typically there's a colon, and then it displays the current working directory. In the command line, it has an idea of a current directory. That's a directory. Sometimes people call it a folder. That's the folder you're currently in. If you type commands and don't specify a directory, it oftentimes assumes the current one. In here, it has a tilde for your current directory. Tilde is an alias for your home directory. So if you're logged in as /home/Bob, then tilde is an alias for that directory. So it'll be tilde is an alias for /home/Bob if you're logged in as Bob, for example. And then in here, they have a space usually, and then they have a dollar symbol here, which is just, it's not like currency or money. It's instead of having like an arrow or something else in there, they just put a dollar in there. I don't know why they put the dollar, but that's what they have. Is basically, I'm ready for you to type a command here. And so they do a couple things with this dollar in here. If you're logged in as a regular user, it's usually $1. And if you're logged in as root, it's a hash symbol here. Again, it's another quick visual indicator as to how you're logged in. If you see a hash symbol here, you probably want to be extra careful about the commands you type in. When you're logged in as root, you can go in and do a lot of harm to your system. It's not like it's going to blow up on you necessarily, but you could, delete a bunch of stuff and have to reinstall, that kind of harm. You're probably not going to damage anything physically, but you can get it to where you lose data and you remove directories that are essential for your distribution to run and so forth in there. So you want to be careful when you're logged in as root, and so you kind of be paying attention to watching that dollar symbol versus hash symbol thing in there. And so in here, you'll type commands. Many commands are just programs that launch. When you type the name of the program and push enter, it finds the program and runs it. Some of the commands are interpreted by the shell directly, and they're not separate programs that get launched. It depends, but most stuff that you launch in here is a separate program. And that's how you launch programs at the command line, is you type the name of the program and press enter, and it launches it. You can even launch graphical programs from the command line if you wish. So some things when you're working in the command line, some basic things in here. It's good to know that there is a current working directory. It's in the prompt, but you can also use commands like pwd to print the current working directory. If you're on a system that doesn't put the current working directory in the prompt, you can type this to find out where you're at. If you want to change your current directory, you can type cd. cd is short for change directory. Then you give it a space, and then you give it a directory to change into. If there is no path to this directory, it assumes it's relative to the current one. In this case, it would assume that this src directory is a directory inside your home directory, your current working directory here. There's a command called echo, which echoes text to the screen. In this case, we're echoing an environment variable called pwd. You can expand the environment variables by putting a dollar in front of them. So echo $pwd will also print your current working directory just like the pwd command will. So you can see we are now in home bones source. ls lists files. It's short for list. It's like the dir command on Windows. And then here it shows that we have an item in there called hello in this example. There's a program called touch. Touch will update the date timestamp for the file for the last time it was edited. It'll look like it's been modified. If the file doesn't currently exist, it will create it as an empty file. It's not used too often, but sometimes it's pretty useful. So we do this touch to create a brand new file .txt, and then we type ls again, and look, we see hello and new file.txt in here. And then a question in chat, are there some operations in Linux that even root is not allowed to do? Sort of. It depends on how you set it up. So one of the big topics of the day is security. If you use Linux and don't enable any special security features, I think you can pretty much do any and everything as the root user. So you can go in there and change permissions and change owners and do all kinds of stuff, whatever you want to do on the system as root. But if you enable some of the security features like SE Linux and some other things on your system, then it's possible for you to prevent even root from being able to do certain things on your system. So usually it's set up so a user can do the things that need to be done, but in this case, it might no longer be the root user that would do those certain things. And so you can modify your system so you can have additional security on there. Yeah, that's a good question. So like I mentioned before, when you launch a program from the command line, basically you type the program name and it goes and finds the program and runs it. It finds the program by searching this environment variable called path. If you're familiar with the command line in Windows, there's a path there. In Windows, I believe, if I remember right, the paths in the list, in the path environment variable, are separated by semicolons. In Linux, they are separated by colons. So the path might look a little different than you're used to. And so in here, this will first look in user local bin. If it doesn't find ls there, then it looks in user local bin. This has it twice in there. So there can be some duplication sometimes. If it doesn't find it there, then it looks in user sbin. If it doesn't find it there, user bin, sbin, bin, user games, user local games, and then snap bin, and then it's got snap bin in there twice. Sometimes that can happen if you run your bash configuration script twice without like exiting your shell. So sometimes there's duplication, but often not. And so if we type which ls, this is going to go along this set of paths in here and find ls and tell you where it found it. Once it finds the first instance of ls, it stops looking and it goes, okay, I found it here. If you type ls from the command line like it's showing in the third command here, it's going to run it from user bin ls. And it'll go run the program. In this case, the program lists the files in your current directory, which you can see coming out on the screen here. If I run gedit, that's the name of the graphical editor, which we showed earlier, it will look along these paths, find gedit, the first instance it finds in there, it will run it, and it will run the graphical program gedit. And so in here, the command line will pause right here. Usually it won't come back to a prompt because gedit is still running. but the graphical program will pop up and you can get in there and edit however you want. There are ways to get it back to the command prompt, even though gedit is still running. No, we just don't talk about that here yet. So here's some basic operations to manage files from the command line. Some of these may be similar to the Windows command line you're used to. By the way, for Mac OS folks, Mac OS is a lot closer to Linux than Windows is in terms of the command line. So a lot of these, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like one for one identical between Mac and Linux on a lot of these commands. So basic operations here, ls lists files. You can just type ls and it displays the current directory. You can specify the file. It'll display information about that one file. Or you can specify the directory. You can specify a relative directory from here or an absolute path to a directory and show the contents for that directory over there or the one under here or wherever. CP is short for copy. You specify the from file and then the to file. Sometimes you specify the file and the to is just the directory name, and so it copies the one file into the directory. You can use move. So copy leaves the original there. Move removes the original, and it's like a copy with the remove afterwards, kind of from a logical perspective. Under the hood, I don't think it's doing that necessarily, but move can be used to move a file from here to there, but it can also be used to rename files. RM is short for remove. It removes files. The item here you specify can be a file or a directory. If it is a directory, it'll say it cannot remove the directory. And you must specify the -R option to remove the directory and all the contents inside. There is also an RMDIR to remove the directory. The RMDIR is a little bit safer because you're not recursively removing it. This is the wrong one. This is mkdir. The RMDIR is a little safer in that it'll make sure the directory is empty before it removes it, whereas the RM-R just removes the directory and all the contents in one shot. Echo echoes text. You can use environment variables and expand them. You can also use, as we'll see later on, command substitution, where you can run a command or a program, and the program launching in here will be replaced with its output, and then you can display it with echo here. PWD prints your current working directory. Mkdir makes a directory. It makes an empty one. CD changes directories. And then there are some editors you can use that are command line only as well. One of them is called Nano. So if you're not familiar with VI or Emacs, if you're not one of those kind of people, Nano is probably a good choice. There's other choices too, but this is a pretty straightforward, kind of intuitive editor, works similar to the way the graphical editors work. Where you have a cursor in there and what you type goes where the cursor is. You can backspace and do all the usual things in there. It's pretty pared down, but usually powerful enough for what most people need. And then cat is displaying the contents of a file. Cat is short for concatenate. That's why it's called cat. It has nothing to do with the animal. But the idea is you specify a file and then another file and another file. It'll display the contents of each file one after the other. It will be concatenating the output of all those files. And then you can redirect that output into a brand new file if you want, or you can just look at them on the screen. But this is the tool to display the contents of a file. In Windows, I think that command is called type. Then you can get help from the command line. So in the graphical environment, you talked about launching the application menu and typing help in the search and running the help program. In the command line, there's also several help programs. One of the most common one is called man, which is short for manual. It's not a gender thing, and so you do man. You can specify a section, and then you can specify the program that you want help on. You do have to know the name of the program here for this to work. So if you're not quite sure what the program name is called, you don't remember it's called ls, for example, then you can use apropos or man-k to search. You can search through its listing of all these help text sections in here and look by keyword and see if you can find out which program it is. There's also the info program. It's very similar to man, but it's kind of this text-based display that's kind of like a hyperlink-based system. We can go over certain sections in there where they're underlined and push enter, and it jumps you over to that other item in there. So it's an alternative help to man. Sometimes the info has more information than man does. So if man it's not quite so clear to me, sometimes I'll jump over to info and try looking in there. And oftentimes info has the information I'm looking for. And you can also use help. Help is a built-in command. And this help gives you help on the shell's internal commands that you can run. So you can't really do help on ls because bash doesn't know about ls. Bash knows about for and while and tests and those kind of things. And help here can give you information about the bash's built-in commands. So the man system has sections in there. They divide it up into sections because sometimes the names do overlap. And so you want to be able to have like a help for a certain maybe program on the command line, and then a separate help for like how a function is called in the C library. And they might be named exactly the same. So you want them to collide with each other. So they have these kind of different sections in there where it'll search the sections beginning with 1 to 2 to 3 and so forth. It may not find the one you're looking for, but then you can specify the section if you wanted to get it from a certain section in there. So you can see there's general programs, there's system calls, there's library routines like ANSI C libraries, fopen, fread, fclose, those types of things. You can get help on those for your programs, program routines, special files, file formats and conventions, games, miscellaneous, system administrator programs, and I think it goes up to 9 on some systems. On some systems, they like omit some, like the miscellaneous one might be empty and there's no help information for anything in there. So here, I thought I'd go ahead and give a quick demo of getting help. So let me share my screen here. So right in here, let's suppose I don't remember it's called ls. Like just pretend I'm like brand new to Linux and I'm trying to learn this stuff and I'm typing commands, it's not working. I'm like, what is that command that lists those files again? And so in here, I can type command-K and I can do a search. I might say like list files. This may be my first attempt. In here, I'm going, yeah, those don't look right. And so I might be scratching my head going, well, let's try this. Let's just try list, see if that comes up with some answers. It's way too much in here, but I can scroll through and, you know, as I look here, vdir, oh, it's directory contents. Let me try this. So I'll do list directory. So it gets kind of like searching online where you might not have the right keywords right away. But here it is, the keyword list directory, that phrase in there is in these 4 different, the help for these 4 different programs. And there it is, the one I'm looking for is ls. So that's the program. I go, yeah, that's it. That's the one I remember now. And then I can do, if I'm not sure how to use it, I do man on ls. And it comes up with this stuff here, list directory contents, ls with options. The options are displayed down below. And then I can list files or directories here. I can even have a list of those if I want to, a sequence of those that are space separated. And I can use the arrows and kind of navigate around in here. And I can see there's all these different options that I can use with ls. I can color the output. I can classify the files to indicate what kind of file it is with these different indicators here, or do file type. File type is very much like -F, but don't append asterisk on executable files. There's all kinds of options in here I can get into. So like here, it's showing me how to use it. I can type ls. I see options in there. I can do ls-l to do a long listing. I might see that in the man page, and it shows the same files, but shows other attributes too. So I can see those in there. Now, if I was looking for a certain option in ls and just wasn't finding it, I might also try info on ls. You can see in here that it's similar information, but the way it's organized in here is different. So it has a description. It talks about its exit status, which I don't know if it talked about too much in the man page, which files are listed. I'm like, maybe I'm curious about this. I want to see which files are listed. I can press enter, and it jumps me over to a hyperlink kind of thing. And then I can specify which files are listed, -A for all, including files that begin with dot. Almost all in directories that do not ignore all files start with the dot and ignore just the dot and the dot. So it's just like -A, but don't print those directories too. And so there's often options here for what to display. And then I can go back with the backspace, I think it is. I don't want to get into here too much. Yeah, here it is. I'm back where I was, and I can go in here and see other information inside info in here. And it's a lot of information in here. I can use page down and page up in here to navigate more quickly information. And I can use Q to quit. So man on LS in here also it's Q to quit. You can see at the bottom H for help. So that's help on how to use man, and Q to quit. So it's kind of nice. You can see here has a lot of the same options, but still more terse in how it presents it. So typically there's 3 levels for help. If I want really, really terse help, I can do ls-help. Most programs support that. And then like it scrolls off the screen. I can actually use this scroll bar to scroll back. But if I didn't want to do that, if that wasn't helpful, I can redirect it through a pager called less. And then I can scroll up and down in here.